Hi girls, today we're going to have a bit of a look and see how the Sturt River moves through Adelaide, where it starts and of course where it ends and what it travels through on its journey. So to get started, to get a little bit of perspective on where we are, we can see that we live in Adelaide, down in South Australia, and we get a bit of a view of how the whole of Adelaide looks. It's a very tall city with lots of urbanisation north and south as it spreads along between the coast and the Mount Lofty ranges. And to get an understanding of where we are here at Marymount, of course we're tucked in down by the coast, down in Hove. So about this Sturt River. Well, Sturt River is pretty important in Adelaide, so let's have a look and see where it starts. And of course the Sturt River, given that it flows through Adelaide, starts up in the Mount Lofty ranges. In actual fact, it starts right next to Crafers, and that's where the whole catchment area begins. Whilst it's a little bit dark there to see, as the Sturt River moves out of the Crafers area and moves into the upper Sturt area, we can really clearly see how the river moves around the ridges of the valley and how the hills flow down into the river, and you can clearly see the green or the dark green line of trees where the river actually flows. You can't see the water, but you can see the trees that the river flows along. So as we follow it down, we follow the river into an area called Frank Smith Park, which is one of the areas that you're going to visit. And as far as we're interested in viewing, this is going to be the top point of the Sturt River that we're going to visit. As it enters Frank Smith Park, it passes through a small series of wetland ponds, and of course those ponds are designed to clean the water, filter the water, and to capture any sediment that travels along the way. As it enters into Frank Smith Park, it passes through a nice area, and of course it exits out and travels all the way through Coromandel Valley. And if you can keep an eye, you can track the fact that those green trees follow the line of the river. As the river moves through Coromandel Valley, it starts flowing into the adjacent suburb, which is Flagstaff Hill. Of course, this is where it starts getting a little bit more obvious. Now, as it travels through Flagstaff Hill, it gets to a really unique feature. And this unique feature is another place that we're going to visit. And this is called the Flood Mitigation Dam. The reason this was built, which it was built in the 60s, was before then it was commonplace for the area of Marion and Oaklands Park to flood. And anywhere from there on could also be flooded. And that was a bit of a problem. So back in the 60s, they built a huge concrete dam wall. And the whole point of it is that for every 1 in 100 year flood, it can capture the water so that it will allow a trickle of water to flow down the Sturt River, but the huge amount of water that's flown in the hills and the catchment area is kept behind the dam wall, and that stops the flooding. So it's a very, very important little quiet piece of infrastructure and technology that we have hidden up in the hills, and it keeps us all safe down on the flat plains. And that's why this big amount of water sits behind it. It's not used for drinking, it's not used for irrigation, it's simply used to hold the water back for when there's a flood. And that's why on the other side of the dam wall, as we follow the river down through Flagstaff Hill, it doesn't look so big. It continues down, and of course we finally make our way down to the flat plains into Darlington. And we come into the Warraparinga wetlands, which we might be familiar with right down there in Darlington. Of course, the wetlands here again capture all the sediment, filter the water, and make it a little bit cleaner as it's picked up a lot of pollutants along the way. At this point, it's really quite clear to see that the river changes shape, because it now turns into this cement spoon drain that anyone who lives in the area would be very familiar with. And this cement spoon drain now starts flowing through all of urban Adelaide. And in fact, if we zoom out, you can see that it follows a line all the way through built-up housing until it finally reaches an important point, which is the Padawalunga, also known as one of the most polluted pieces of water in Australia. And you can see why, because the river that it feeds from travels through all those houses. So the Padawalunga is a huge lake, and of course that's the end point for the Sturt River, because from here it simply flows out into the Gulf of St. Vincent. So if we have a bit of a look, we can see again that the Sturt River has a fairly long path to travel, starting all the way up by Crafers, and then making its way through Coromandel Valley, through Flagstaff Hill, down through Darlington, along a spoon drain through a very built up urban Adelaide, and then finally out through Glenelg to the Gulf of St. Vincent.